We're very pleased to welcome today's guest speaker, David McAfee, journalist, public speaker, author of Mom, Dad, I'm an Atheist, The Guide to Coming Out as a Non-Believer, and other titles, which are available on the back table. He's a columnist for Canadian Freethinker Magazine and a contributor to American Atheist Magazine. David attended the University of California, Santa Barbara, graduated with bachelor degrees in English and religious studies with an emphasis on Christianity and Mediterranean religions. He's also been quoted by CNN, Huffington Post, Publishers Weekly, and published by the Richard Dawkins Foundation for Reason and Science. David has spoken for numerous groups and conventions, including the FreeOK Convention in 2014. It is my pleasure to welcome to Houston Oasis, David McAfee. David.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you guys very much for coming out. I really appreciate it. And special thanks to Josh and Mike for inviting me. It's my first time in Texas. And when I told my fans that I was going to come to Houston to do a talk, most people said that I needed a bulletproof vest. And they said I'd constantly be needing to defend myself from religious fanatics. But this has not been the case. And I'm still wearing the bulletproof vest, but I don't need it. So before I actually get into the bulk of the talk, which is how to discuss controversial topics, I want to talk a little bit about myself and how I got involved in secular and skeptical activism. Like many of you, I was raised as a Christian. I was raised by Christian parents and Christian grandparents, and we went to church every week. We went to a non-denominational Christian church. But unlike a lot of people, I was never religious, and I didn't ever believe in any gods. And a lot of people ask me why that is, why I never accepted Christianity, even though my whole family was Christian. And they assume that it's because of some trauma in the church, or maybe that I was just too smart and figured it all out. But it's not the case. What actually happened was much more simple. I didn't realize what we were learning was supposed to be real. So I saw church as more of like a daycare type of thing. I went there and we sang songs and I got candy. I earned Jesus bucks that I was able to exchange for toys and time on the trampoline in the back of the church. So the bottom line was that I kind of just saw it as fun. I loved going to church. Until one day when I didn't want to go to church, and I told my grandma that, and she threatened me with eternal damnation and hellfire. And I realized that she believed in ancient resurrections and worldwide floods that drowned all of humanity, and I was very confused. This, by the way, is the Awkward Moments Children's Bible. I wrote the foreword for this book, and it is not for children. Contrary to the title, it is for adults, but it has a lot of really good examples from the Bible, a lot of quotes that it illustrates graphically with cartoons. So the concept is awkward moments that you won't find in your average children's Bible, and so that's a really cool book. Oh, this is broken. There we go. All right, so as a result of how I grew up, when I realized that my grandparents and parents believed in all these things, I had a lot of questions. These are the type of questions that I was asking, and that did not go over well for the people in my church or my family. But instead of doing what a lot of people would do in this situation and turning away from religion completely and deciding never to go to church again because it's all fake, I became more interested in religion in general, and I wanted to find out what people believed and, more importantly, why they believed it. So I started going to church more and more often. I started going about 3 times a week in high school. I had a girlfriend at the time who was Mormon. I would go to her temple. I just wanted to learn more and more about religions, and so that continued throughout my high school career. And so when I graduated high school and I went to college, nobody was surprised that I went on to study religions. I ended up getting my religious studies degree from UC Santa Barbara. It was actually religious studies with an emphasis in Christianity and Mediterranean religions. And I also have an English degree as well. But those religious studies classes, I love them. I mean, a lot of people confuse it. They think that I did theology, but I did religious studies. So religious studies, you emphasize a historical approach to religions, and you look at how they interacted with one another in the past and how they were formed. And it's completely different than learning the Bible as a sacred holy text that you must obey. I didn't have any problems with my atheism in school. I never had a teacher who had an issue with it. I never had another student. In fact, most often I saw the opposite. I saw people who were believers and who were in the religious studies because they thought it was going to be a theology program, and they were surprised, unpleasantly. And they found out that they were learning about the Native American creation myths right alongside the Genesis creation myth, and they were not okay with that in most times. So I never experienced any problems with my atheism in school. And as I mentioned before, I never really experienced any problems in my family. I mean, they learned early on that I was a non-believer, and they were pretty okay with it. I grew up in California, and not too conservative of an area, and as you can see, my parents still love me. That's my mom. She's a former Jehovah's Witness and also a former other non-denominational Christian. She now considers herself an agnostic non-believer. She's at an event of mine right now, that one in Washington State where I went last year. She really supports my work. She's always commenting on my fan page and stuff too. It's really great. This is my dad, and he is a cultural Christian who knows almost nothing about the religion but still identifies as a Christian. And I think he probably always will, but he still reads my books, he still loves my work. We've never had an argument over it. He just kind of ignores the topic entirely, which is pretty common in those instances. But I did soon realize that not everybody was as understanding as my parents and as my family. When I hit a bump in the road after graduation and I tried to apply for the master's PhD program at UC Santa Barbara. And I had a meeting with the dean of admissions for the program, and we sat down. Before we even began the discussion, I saw her type my name into Google, and she clicked the first link, which was from Amazon, and it had a picture of my first book, which was self-published at the time but has since been republished as the book back there. She saw this cover, and this professor previously came from a theology program, so she wasn't really aware that secular religious studies programs can't discriminate against people for this reason. But the second she saw this, literally judging a book by its cover, she turned to me and said, "I have to word this carefully, but you won't fit in with this department's milieu because you're an atheist activist with an axe to grind."
Oh.
And keep in mind, this was before I ever submitted an application to the program. This was a pre-application talk, and I was already rejected from the program because she saw the cover of my book. I asked how Christian missionaries, who would by definition be Christian activists who go to other countries to try and convert people to their religion, how those people can't be excluded from the program for the same reasons. But she did not address that issue, and I never really heard back from her about that. But I just don't see how the difference, how they're allowed in and I'm not. I decided to write a blog post about the experience. I just wanted to get it off my chest about what had happened. And much to my surprise, there were a bunch of support letters that I received and also that went to the school. The blog post was picked up by the Washington Post and Friendly Atheist and a few other big websites, and so it got the word out there. And people sent their letters to the school, and they contacted me and did an investigation, and ultimately they issued an apology, which was nice. They did ask me if I wanted to be considered for the program, and I said I would not like to work under that professor, which is understandable. So after I experienced this discrimination for being an atheist, this was entirely new to me. That's when I decided to write Mom, Dad, I'm an Atheist, because contrary to the title, the book is actually more about dealing with other issues when you're a non-believer, dealing with anything. When you're a non-believer and you're in public, you're going to be asked all sorts of questions. People assume that you're religious in a number of ways. Maybe just a show of hands here. Has anybody here, as an atheist, been asked what church you go to? Like, they just assume, okay, wow, yeah, that's every single person. So the book addresses those types of issues and how to interact with believers in a way that doesn't seem confrontational. Mom, Dad, I'm an Atheist also has religion and grief, a chapter on religion and grief, and even chapters about coming out to your significant other, which Jason and Julia are actually featured in the book. And hi guys. They have their testimonials in the book. They're a married couple who had to come out to each other as atheists from being very strong Christians. So a lot of interesting stories in there. But since writing that book and doing talks and participating in secular activism in general, I saw firsthand how difficult it was to have these discussions without believers getting angry. And I still want to make the most out of the talks, and I've had a bunch of series of interactions with people that I would consider positive ones. I even had a discussion with Goldust, a professional wrestler for the WWE. He called me an effing atheist prick. And instead of insulting him back, I talked to him and I said, I'm just trying to be reasonable here. I'm just looking for evidence. If you have any to present, then I'd be happy to look at it, but I don't see what makes me a prick. And eventually he did apologize on Twitter, which was pretty cool. But my favorite interaction was with Christian apologist and philosopher William Lane Craig. Craig was contacted last year by a Christian who read Disproving Christianity and was finding it hard to believe in God. And this was William Lane Craig's response, was quit reading the infidel material.
Good answer.
The question was asked in a Q&A on William Lane Craig's website, and it was published just as you see it here. Garbage in, garbage out was what he called his answer. And the questioner said that they wanted to believe in God, but they're having trouble because they were exposed to Disproving Christianity and the writings of Richard Dawkins and a few other items. Craig went on to offer 4 suggestions, including quit reading and watching the infidel material you've been absorbing. To me, that just says it all. Quit reading and watching the material. I disagree fundamentally with William Lane Craig on this because I think quit reading is never good advice. Yeah. I would never encourage an atheist to avoid the Bible out of fear that its strong arguments might compel that person to believe. And he seems to have done exactly that. He tells them to avoid my work completely, just ignore it and focus on art, focus on apologetics, focus on defending your faith. And to me, that was just such a contradictory concept to getting to the truth. I encourage everyone, believers, non-believers, everyone, to learn all about religions and how they're formed and where they come from, because there's that information, that knowledge, you can't unlearn it, and it helps you understand where it comes from. You won't be as mad at religions if you understand how they were created and how they're spread. I find that I'm one of the few atheists I know who doesn't hate religion. I enjoy it. I love learning about it. It's one of my favorite topics. It's why I went to school for it. And I think that's largely because I understand it better than a lot of people who do hate it. So based on these interactions and a few other talks that I had with people, I started to become known as sort of the friendly person who was good at having debates with believers without pissing anyone off. And I like that I'm known for that. And I first started this talk. It was called How to Discuss Religion in a Friendly and Effective Way. But I soon realized that how to effectively discuss sacred cows makes more sense.
There it goes.
Because the principles are the same with any firmly held belief. It's difficult for people to talk about them without getting upset, and it applies to a lot of things. It applies to politics, but it also applies to religion. It also applies to all sorts of false beliefs, from ghosts to psychics to any kind of thing. People, if they're really firmly held, they can get upset when these beliefs are being discussed. So I always hear people say, never discuss religion or politics. And to that I always like to add, unless you want to engage in discussion about some of the most important topics of this or any generation. And that's because these ideas inform our decisions, they shape our experiences, and they should never be barred from discourse. nobody wins when the free flow of ideas is interrupted, because nobody's able to get information. And so that's what I'm all about, is being able to talk about things that other people wouldn't want to talk about, because those are the important things, those are the ones that need answers. So my first recommendation is to determine your goal in the talk. It's hard to discuss a sacred cow if you're trying to change the person's mind. And so I never go in with that mentality. I'm usually trying to recommend steps to get to the truth regardless. I'll ask them about empirical evidence, for instance, and I'll leave it to them to look for that evidence and make their conclusions from there. I want my advice, unlike William Lane Craig's, to get people to the truth no matter what my opinion might be. If your goal in a discussion is to just beat your opponent, then the information isn't the center of it anymore. And so I think it's best to always make sure that you're there to learn new information and share ideas. If that's your goal, then you're going to come out a winner almost every time, even if you're wrong to begin with. But even if you aren't trying to change anyone's mind, it's important to recognize that people's minds do get changed in the process. I do hear a lot that they're never going to change their minds, but from Christians denouncing their religion to 9/11 truthers admitting they've been misled, I've seen really great examples of evidence-based thinking in my line of work, and I'm sure all of you have too. Every single one of you in the past has held a belief that was false, and many of you have corrected those beliefs and now hold true beliefs, and that's something that we're able to do as people. And when you no longer hold that belief, it's easy to look down on those who do and say, well, this Christian will never learn, but you might have been a Christian, your family might have been a Christian. A lot of people had these thoughts and these ideas, and they were able to change, and so it's demonstrably false to say that they won't. It's also important to note that all religious people aren't stupid or dogmatic or anything like that. If you lump people into these categories, it keeps you from having a real discussion. Especially when it comes to religion, the average believer is guilty of nothing more than gullibility, wishful thinking, and maybe being indoctrinated. And when we form opinions on topics, you have to start from an objective perspective. You have to look at information from an unbiased view. And when you're indoctrinated, it keeps you from doing that. It prevents you from looking at it that way. So while people may seem dumb or ignorant in these manners, it's because they're likely holding on to these beliefs and unable to change. But the best way to get around that isn't to yell or berate or anything like that. It's talk things out, be reasonable, and for me, that's achieved the best results. I like to start off all talks also by finding common ground. For me, this is really easy. I've studied religion and the supernatural all my life, and it's one of the most interesting things to me in the world. And so I like to tell people that I have a lot in common with priests and pastors and psychics and ghost hunters and all sorts of things, because we're all interested in the supernatural. I just don't think it's real. And so when you start from that perspective, they do tend to see that you do have some common ground here. I'm not there to attack their ideas. I'm just there to... I would love for a lot of things I would love for ghosts to be real, psychics, gods would be cool, not specific religions gods, but maybe a new one. But a lot of people don't know that, and they think that I'm hating them and their ideas, and so I try to find that common ground. And for you, it could be anything. That's just my typical one. One of the most important things in these discussions is to stick to the topic at hand. And that's because when people are uncomfortable with their beliefs, any people, you guys do it as well, whether you recognize it or not, we all do. When you're uncomfortable with a topic, you tend to change the topic. This could come in the form of moving the goalposts. It could come in the form of distracting through insults and ad hominem remarks and things like that. But if you stick to the topic and you don't let those stray the discussion away from the original point, you're going to have a much more effective discussion, because people are either going to have to stick to the point or give up on the debate entirely, in which you're a winner regardless. So that's definitely the way to do it. I also like to note that I like to treat all people like they're on an honest search for reality. And this is obviously until they show you otherwise, but I begin all debates thinking that people want the truth. A lot of people don't. A lot of people are really only looking for what makes them feel comfortable. They're looking for comfortable answers, whether they're lies or whether they're the truth. But if you treat people like they are looking for the truth, you can get them the right answers, and whether they like it or not, you might even plant a seed that will help them in the future actually get to that point. I also have a couple of announcements before I go on to the Q&A section. The Belief Book. In January, I'm going to be publishing a children's book on religion and beliefs. And this book is with Chuck Harrison's the illustrator's name, and it teaches kids and adults alike about where religions came from, about how beliefs work, about how evidence works. The scientific method is in there as well. And that's going to be for kids of all ages, and January 2015 is the release date. Also, Absence of Clothing. I work with them regularly. We do have some shirts in the back and stickers and stuff as well, but if you go online, if you don't buy one here and you want to go online, you can use DGM discount code to get 10% off any items at absenceofclothing.com. And I will now open it up for questions. Yes. You'll be next.
Yeah. One of the things I encounter a lot is the issue of prayer in schools, where, of course, I don't want to discourage it as it singles my child out. But is there anything you could suggest in that conversation to work kind of because people get very hostile?
Yeah, well, I mean, prayer in school, if it's forced prayer, it's illegal. That's something that should definitely be taken legal action. My problem with people discussing religion in schools is that they tend to forget that we're allowed to teach religion in schools. You're just not allowed to teach religion as an instruction. You're not allowed to force people to pray. You're not allowed to say Christianity is the true religion. But because of those laws, it makes people not teach religious studies in schools, which I think is a real disservice to America. If you're experiencing an issue, like I said, legal action would be the first course if you're being forced to pray. If it's just a prayer that's being said in the school, I see no problem with that, just because prayer is essentially talking to yourself, and it can have therapeutic benefits, just like meditation, deep thought. I see no problem with that.
Sorry, let me explain. I meant more of the political debate that I'm getting into with other parents at the school where they want to change the law.
Oh yeah. Well, good luck. Yeah, the good luck overturning. Good luck overturning the separation of church and state on their part. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And has there been any leeway? I mean, has that started to happen where people have introduced legislation or anything like that?
Not that I'm aware of. I'm kind of interested to see what happens in this.
Yeah, I will be following that as well. Sorry, you first and then you.
I was curious, are you going to university, or where are your studies taking you right now?
I graduated from UC Santa Barbara with 2 bachelor's degrees, and I'm planning in the future to get my next graduate level religious studies degree either from Harvard Extension or I have a couple other schools that I'm considering. Boulder, Colorado is another one. Yes?
This may sound a little silly. I always feel like I'm pressured to placate to religious people when I sneeze and they say, "I bless you," and they get offended if I don't say thank you. So, any suggestions in that realm how to not be drawn into placating someone else's belief systems?
Well, I'll give you a few things. First, what I do is I don't have a problem with people getting offended if it's something that it's their problem. If they get offended that I don't say thank you, that's their problem. I don't say thank you when people bless me. I don't bless others when they sneeze. I think it's a useless cultural tradition, and I don't need to take part in it. And they normally don't ask me about, why didn't you say thank you? But if they did, I'd tell them those facts. I also, in the past, I took Spanish in high school and college, and so I would say salud, just means health when people sneeze, another thing that I like to do to get around it. But generally, I don't say or do anything because it's a normal bodily function, just seems redundant. Anyone else? Yes.
I go to school, and we, like at most public schools, you say the Pledge of Allegiance in the morning, and I generally will just stand up and not say anything. But people in my school think that I like hate America because I don't say the pledge. But I really just don't say it because I don't agree that our country is under God. So what would you recommend to do with that? Because
Well-
I don't hate America.
Well, first of all, you do. No. So I think it's important for the pledge aspect. It's important to note that the original pledge didn't have the under God aspect. That was something that was added later. So a lot of people will just say it and ignore that part. I don't think the school should be making you say it regardless, though, if it says under God, if they tell you to say under God, or if those are the words that they use. I know that there was a big court case in Northern California about that a few years ago in Elk Grove, and if they're telling you to say those words, then that's something, again, that would be something that legal action should be required. Otherwise, there's nothing wrong with just saying the original pledge, or even telling people that you're saying the original pledge, and I'd like to say it how it was made. And I don't think teachers or students would give you a problem with that, especially because it's still about America, and you can still love our country.
Yeah, also, because in 7th grade you take Texas history. I think that's with every state, but I'm not really sure.
Yeah.
No, I did not take Texas history.
No, I mean state history, but
Got it.
no, but and so for a test we were supposed to write the Pledge of Allegiance, and I left out that part because I had read that was how it was originally wrote, and I got it incorrect and wrong. And I went to the teacher, and she said, "Oh no, we say under God here."
Wow.
And I
You
just
say,
like,
oh, no.
I say, and I got nowhere.
yeah, and it confuses me because it's like
It should.
you
That's
shouldn't-
wrong.
You shouldn't impose your beliefs on someone.
I have the name and email of the attorney who won the pledge lawsuit in Northern California. So if they're marking you wrong for writing facts, then let me know and I'll give you his email. Yes.
In your experience, what has been the one point that you've been able to make to a religious person to start getting them to question their faith?
The reason I published Disproving Christianity was because I know a lot of Christians who consider the Bible to be flawless. They think it's an inerrant document and they think that it can't have any problems. My grandparents are some of the people who are fundamentalist Christians. If I pointed out a verse in the Bible that was ridiculous and said, "Do you believe this?" they'll say, "Yes, absolutely." So when I was in college, I thought, all I have to do is compile some contradictions in the Bible and it'll make these people think. And I was surprised at how well it worked. I put together this book in college just from reading the Bible and taking my normal religious studies classes, and I was surprised at how many Christians contacted me and said, "I thought the book was flawless. Now that I know that even one of these flaws is true," which the book, it's a pocket guide, it's a small book, but it has a lot of contradictions and a lot of information in there. And I was surprised by how many people said, "This made me realize the book wasn't flawless," and the next step from that is, well, what else could be wrong in it, which starts the slide. And so I think that was a really good idea for my first book. It's done wonders for a lot of people, they've told me.
Thank you.
Yes?
I was going to suggest for the Pledge of Allegiance, you could use a different preposition. You could say one nation beyond.
One thing at a time, sweetie.
I would not recommend that. Yes?
No, just leave that out and say you don't want
Okay.
to start with controversy. Be a good
Or
example.
just say S, under God's. It's a hard more than one.
He said at his school.
Nice.
He said at his school sometimes
Test it.
he doesn't like to tell people we don't believe in God because they don't. He likes to be able to say this here. He's really excited about being able to.
My new book, the Belief book that's coming out in January, is really going to help kids understand religion and how and why people believe different things. That's a lot of problems for kids. They have different people telling them different things, their parents, their friends at school, other relatives. They tell them that they believe this or that, and then it confuses the child. And this book's really going to explain not just what religion is, but where it came from, and really help them understand that. So instead of being scared at school, they'll understand, and they'll just more feel bad for the other kids than anything else for not understanding those concepts. Yes?
You mentioned that you like religion, and I've encountered a lot of religious people who are, obviously intolerant of non-religious people. But I've also met a lot of non-religious people who are intolerant of religion altogether.
All the time.
And I want to ask you, how do you talk to them?
Normally I get yelled at by them.
Yeah.
I talk to atheists, other non-believers who hate religion all the time, and who they tell me that I'm wrong for doing what I'm doing and for trying to teach people about religion instead of just telling them that it's terrible. But I understand how religion has helped humanity in the past. I understand that before we had complex judicial systems, these ancient moral codes helped people keep track of their society. The problem for the religions is that our morals have evolved. Our morals change over time, and so those stagnant texts then become obsolete. And so people either decide to disregard them entirely, become liberal Christians or liberal Muslims, that they disregard the old stuff that they don't believe in, or under a scientific type model, they correct those and put out new holy books without false information in them. But that's the downside with religion, is that it's stagnant. And those people, if they don't understand that concept, they think, well, religion is causing people to be denied rights, and that's true, but that's because there are ancient morals of our ancient ancestors. Those aren't our morals that we're basing those decisions on. So religion is a problem there, but it's only because people are using religion in that way. And there are also other ways to use religion that I study it more like I would study Greek mythology than anything else. But people believed those in the days, the Greek myths, those ran the politics of their day as well. So it's hard to see that they're identical. It's hard to not see that they're identical.
Thank you.
David, before
Yes.
you go on, because we're recording this, I'd like to have the questions be on the microphone if possible. So
Let's do about we have to do about 2 more questions, I
Okay.
think. Yeah.
Right behind you in the cool hat.
Thank you. I just wanted to know, you said that religion changes very, very slowly, but recently with this new pope, there's been some pretty dramatic changes in tone and message from the most unchanging church, right? And I just want to know how you felt about, some of the things that's gone on, like, who am I to judge and other pronouncements.
I would say that they have definitely changed tone. Maybe they got a new PR director or something like that. None of the policies have actually changed. The current pope said that he believes that evolution could be a process by which God created us and how we were evolved over time. But that's long been the position of the Catholic Church. That's not anything new. His personal mentality towards these things is great, and it's something that could encourage other Catholics to follow suit. But ultimately, I haven't seen anything that I would consider substantial. Mostly, it's all been relatively weak, in my opinion. If you're trying to actually, if he wanted to make changes, he would go give a lot of condoms to Africa and save lives. Really.
Let's do one more.
Yes.
Well, first things first, that most of my friends know that I'm an atheist, and most of them are pretty much Christians, and they constantly bug me and say, "Why are you an atheist? Why are you an atheist?" And in my mind, I'm thinking, "Shut up, shut up, shut up, shut up." But I need to figure out how to deal with this.
I'll tell you what I would do is, when I'm asked about that, why are you an atheist, why are you an atheist, the only answer I have is the truth. I haven't seen evidence that any gods exist. If we did a scientific study and we were able to prove that prayer to a Christian God worked, that he was literally granting people's prayers, I would believe in God, and I would no longer be an atheist, and I would give up this talk and then go home and become pastor or something. But because that has never happened, that's why I'm an atheist. And so you have to look at the reason why you're an atheist and answer them with that. If it's because you haven't seen evidence for gods, then you answer that way. I also think the belief book that's coming out in January will be of help to you because it explains why your friends believe that way, and so it'll be less telling them to shut up or thinking for them to shut up, and more understanding where they're coming from and saying, well, I don't believe those things because you believe those things because you were raised to believe them, and I don't believe them because I haven't seen the evidence. I hope that helps. Yeah.